I know a lady who, for some time, had lived in a multi-family dwelling. It's become an increasingly common thing. A former, probably single-family house, large house, where now people, multiple either singles or couples, lives in the various rooms, and they share a bathroom or bathrooms and a kitchen. I think they call that a boarding house, but back in the day when I was young, boarding house meant that the owner lived there and served food. Anyway, multiple people live in this house. And it was a madhouse. As almost everybody that I know who lives in such arrangements reports. Because if you share a bathroom with other people, turns out there's never a uniform code of what people consider clean or stealing, like stealing stuff you own or stealing food or keeping bathrooms clean, kitchen clean. It's endless drama. And it was especially so in the place where she lived. It was pandemonium. Drama, messiness, irresponsibility. She complained about it, 24/7. Finally, she couldn't live with it anymore. And in fact, I finally suggested to her, honey, every time we talk about the place where you live, and I'm bored. I would think that by now you would be bored of it, but it took her a while. So she moved to a new place. Some inconveniences, multiple story walk up, but a new place where she was the only tenant. She said it was like, so much quieter. That lasted for hours. And then welcome to life, because difficult people are everywhere. I say it out loud if somebody asks my opinion, but when somebody says, I just hate this town, so they're going to move to another town, I'm going, you're taking the problem with you. I hate this marriage, so they go to another one, and I'll be darned if the new partner isn't wonderful in the beginning, but ends up being just like the old partner, and on and on. Same with jobs. But she moves, and she writes and says, almost immediately, doors started slamming. So although she's the only tenant in her place, her own bathroom, her own kitchen, it's an apartment building. There are many people that live in this building. And you can hear things even 2 and 3 stories away if they're loud enough. She said doors started slamming, and from the next wall, there was very loud music through, and doesn't every apartment dweller say this, through very thin walls. I've always wanted to see a contest between people who live in apartments and see actually how thin their walls were and have somebody declared the winner. There's got to be a reality show, that could do this. She said, I became increasingly annoyed and made up a drama that I would need to move from the new place. Now, this is 1 week after she's moved to the new place. She continues, so I decided to act, but in a different way from how I always have. That's usually a good choice, because if we do the same thing over and over again and it gets us really terrible results, it's probably going to get us terrible results the next time too. So she says, I'm going to do things differently. I feel loved. I chose to continue to feel loved and to share it with a total stranger. So I went to meet my neighbor. He was young, and I think he might have been surprised just to see me knock on his door. I mean, somebody his age knocking on his door out of the blue, he looked surprised. I just chatted with him, and after just talking for a while, where does he come from? What job does he have? Where's his family? Blah, blah, blah. I brought up the noise. I said, have you noticed that it can be, pretty noisy around here? And she said he got this sheepish look on his face. And he said, well, my door is really difficult to close. Anybody who's ever done work with doors knows that the little latch has to meet with the little place that the latch goes into. And if the door doesn't fit right, you really have to slam the door in order to get that latch to drop into the space. And I know carpenters would use different terms than that space. But he admitted that the door is difficult to close, and so he's had to slam the door. She continues, how foolish would I have felt if I had confronted him about the slamming while I was irritated when it wasn't his fault. So I casually told him some things about his place. I showed him how he could shut the door differently, how he could make a tiny adjustment with a screwdriver and poof, the door would just shut with minimal effort. How the apartment, for example, where his apartment and my apartment, because it's on the top floor of this apartment building, have a kind of weird address that's not recognized by the post office. And he had been wondering why he wasn't getting his mail, stuff like that. So he and I just had a nice, friendly little chat as neighbors. I helped him. He gave me some advice about the new neighborhood. Who knew that that would be better? Yeah, exactly. Until you do things differently, how can you know that things are going to be better? But we can predict that if we keep doing things the same, the results are going to be the same. She continues. So I started from a place of fear and pain, which in the past I would have nursed, to a place of being just irate, and instead I chose to be a kind neighbor and made a friend. Sweet. You conclude, I'm so grateful for all I've learned that helps me to know that I'm worthwhile enough that every little thing doesn't have to upset me. You have to know this woman personally, as I do, to know how much of her life she has spent upset. She was raised in a drama-filled household. It's been drama all of her life. The culture she comes from is filled with drama. And so she moves from one crazy house to an apartment where she's the only tenant. And guess what? Crazy and drama-filled without anybody else in the apartment. So here she says, things have really changed for me. I can change my judgments, ask for what I need, ask but not demand, and things turn out better. Who knew? No kidding. And to pretty much everybody who's listening can identify with some part of this, having repeated the same behavior with those people, whoever they are, might even be people who are part of your family, and the results end up badly. Or we could change ourselves and our perspective and our ability to love, because loving really does work better, in addition to which it makes us happier. Why not try? New subject. We wonder sometimes how people can turn out afraid, angry, difficult to get along with, and we're surrounded by people like that, just like the lady I was just talking about. Everywhere she went, she was surrounded with people who were afraid and angry and difficult to get along with, including herself. The stories that I personally have heard in my lifetime, and I've only shared a tiny fraction on these video chats, of the stories that I hear every day. People who are beaten regularly, people who are sexually abused to the point that if I made a movie depicting some people's lives, nobody would believe it. They would say that it was over the top and hyped, and nobody could endure that kind of suffering. Oh, yeah, they really can. One man's father, for example, was telling me, the man was telling me the other day that his father, when he was a child, would wake him up in the middle of the night, put a board on the bed, sit on the board in the middle of the bed, in the middle of the night with this, 7-year-old going, what are we doing? And insist that the son get on the board and row the boat with him. Because this happened often enough and his father behaved crazily like this regularly enough, the boy thought that, well, doesn't everybody get up in the middle of the night and sit on a board and, row the boat in the middle? These are the crazy lives we're surrounded by. These are the crazy lives that many of us lead. Another man was describing how his father had more than once in the middle of the night set his hair on fire, the boy's hair. So that would be a little disorienting, don't you think? You're lying there asleep and you wake up thinking it's warmer than usual and your hair is on fire. I knew a man who woke up in the middle of the night with his father giving him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. And it turns out that the boy's heart hadn't stopped and he hadn't quit breathing. If you want any idea of how uncomfortable this would be, just ask somebody to give you a mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when everything's fine. It turns out to be quite uncomfortable when you're already breathing and your heart is beating. Another man was sitting at the dinner table and his father said, "Stop that dog," the boy's dog, from yapping. Other than grab the dog by the collar and take him outside, I don't know how you stop dogs from barking, but the boy did not respond quickly enough. So the father grabbed the dog, snapped his neck, and threw him down on the dining room table and said, "There, now it's quiet and we have something for dessert." 2 for 1. As insane as these stories are, it's just as notable that none of these people had ever told anybody about this craziness, about any of these stories. I was the first to hear them. They thought it was just kind of a normal part of life, that such things just, periodically occurred. If that's how you're raised from the beginning, then it becomes, by definition, normal, meaning of the norm. So how could such people possibly grow up to feel cared for or safe or connected to any other human being? Now, imagine that you had your dog killed and thrown down on the dining room table in front of you. You might feel less than connected to other human beings. You might not clean up your toothpaste in a shared multi-person dwelling off the sink like your roommate thinks you should, because you consider it enough that you just managed to get up in the morning and go to your job and, not die. It's no wonder that people are afraid and defending themselves almost all the time. I know a man who I respect who was told by an old mentor, this is many years ago, before the world got even crazier. His old mentor said to him one day, "If you assume that half the people that you meet are in serious emotional trouble or physical trouble, you'll be right." And this friend of mine, this man I respect, thought of his mentor, what a cynical old man. No. This man that I'm talking about now says, turns out that my mentor actually vastly underestimated how much trouble people's lives are in. People are in pain everywhere we go. These crazy stories are not rare. I almost expect them. I almost expect to hear one of them every day. So imagine how these people turn out. And many people who are just as traumatized as these people were just flat neglected, just simply not loved and taught sufficiently. Childhood trauma and PTSD have become normal. Sad, but it's the case. I see magazines, newspapers, news programs lamenting everything. You see the same magazines and news programs. Sexual harassment, Me Too, the Me Too movement, school shootings, what's that hashtag? No more or never again, or there's a hashtag everything now. Racism, intolerance of people who have sexual preferences or choices different from theirs, political hatred and divisiveness, and it just goes on and on and on. Pick up a magazine or newspaper and you can read about hate, intolerance, anger, conflict, and on and on. I read a Time magazine article, in fact, the entire magazine was devoted to this subject, the solution to hatred. And I thought, well, this should be interesting. And the lead article, written by somebody whose writing I just adore. This person can write just like crazy. The lead article, in the process of describing the solution to hatred, spewed hatred at several political figures. And I'm thinking, so we're going to solve hate with just hating some different people. I'm thinking that's not going to work very well. Hate and more hate. And we're looking in all the wrong places for the solution. Legislation, never going to happen. There's a very old saying that says you can't legislate morality. Well, you can't legislate love either. You can't legislate kindness. We try more hate against the people who are hateful, which is actually really common. You're being hateful, well, then I'll just be louder. We try controlling all this hatred with laws and endless talking and talk shows and blaming and gun control, and I could just go on and on. You've heard them all. Actually, just turn on talk radio and you can hear them all again. People don't grow up to hate on their own. Memorize that. People who hate were taught to hate. They were taught that. They were not taught to be loving. If you're not taught to be loving and somebody inconveniences you enough time, you're going to defend yourself. And one of the ways is with hate. So you were taught to hate whether the word hate was ever used or not. Or people are just in so much pain that hatred makes them feel more powerful. We use it to defend ourselves. We feel powerful. We emulate what we've seen when people are hateful. The opportunities to learn hatred are, well, everywhere. And what everybody is missing, and when I say everybody, I mean like 99.99. And once you get to enough nines, then you don't have to keep saying 9. You just get to say nobody or everybody. What everybody's missing is that it all begins in childhood. People don't begin as adults to be hateful. It starts with parents and other adults and what they teach little children. Maybe someday people are going to understand that. It's my primary mission in life, and I'm married to a darling who shares the same mission. Teach people that we've got to teach our children what love looks like, what it feels like, because loved and loving children don't do this. They don't incite chaos. They are not hateful. They don't commit sexual crimes. They're not intolerant. They're not racist. They're not on and on and on. We're trying to teach parents to raise children who don't grow up to hate or be afraid or withdrawn from the world, or all the other things people do when they don't feel loved. We're going to keep at it. And if you're listening, you're part of that. You have the opportunity to decrease the hatred in the world by loving the person next to you, by being like the lady who simply went next door and talked to her neighbor instead of banging the very thin walls and screaming at him through the walls. So fighting noise with noise, just like we fight hate with hate. New subject. Romance is, the subject of how many movies, books, and on and on. Romance novels are the number one genre in the world as far as books go. Romance is very intoxicating. There's almost nothing like it. Often associated with early love or initial love. Nothing quite like the first kiss with the first girlfriend or the first time you ever felt cared for by somebody. Oh, it's just, you get drunk. And it is fun. There's no doubting that. The drunk feeling is real. Whether it's based on what is real, that's another thing, but it feels real. but it almost never lasts. Almost never, like 99 point, at least 9. And then we try to recreate that initial feeling of romance. We look to create a similar high in much the same way that somebody who uses cocaine the first time, I've never met anybody who uses cocaine regularly who the first time didn't go, whoa, this is the solution to all of life's problems and world peace. This is it. Which is why they use it the second time, because they're hoping to recreate that initial whew. And we do it with romance and lots of things. And sometimes we can create that initial feeling, but briefly. And then if it doesn't continue, we keep trying over and over again. Or if it doesn't happen in a romance, well, then we just leave and we move on to somebody else who by definition now is an initial romance, is a new one, and new just feels better. I probably used this statistic before, but they did a study that where they took 100 people, not making this up, and asked them to taste ice cream and asked them how many liked ice cream. 100 out of 100. I'll be darned. I'm assuming that there were no lactose intolerant people in there, but everybody liked ice cream. Then they gave 50 people French vanilla. This was vanilla ice cream, by the way. They gave them French vanilla ice cream. Crazily, all of them liked French vanilla ice cream better. So, or did they give it to 50 or did they give it to... Yeah, they must have done it with 50. And the 50 who got the French vanilla liked it better. But they discovered that the people who liked vanilla ice cream better than regular French vanilla only had to eat it 4 times before they didn't find that it tasted better anymore. 4 times. And the newness was gone. That happens in relationships and with everything else. We love newness. We like excitement. But see, even though the excitement is real, I mean, that initial feeling of, I like French vanilla ice cream better, that's real. The people aren't making that up. They didn't know they were being given French vanilla ice cream. But excitement is not fulfillment. And that's what we're here for. Fun is not the same as happiness, which is what we really want. But see, they have some similarities. So we keep pursuing excitement and fun, hoping that it will somehow turn into fulfillment and happiness, but it doesn't. Oh, we wish that it would, but it doesn't. I knew a man who was 55 years old who fell in love first with a woman when he was in his 20s. Now he's 55 now. For 35, at least 30 years. He has been looking ever since for a woman with the same exact body type. I've seen her picture. Her same face and same age. So he's now 55, but he's looking for a woman who's 25 years old and looks just like his old girlfriend. Because why? It's understandable why. It's nutty, but it's understandable. Because it was so exciting for him the first time. He wants to recreate that. Good luck with recreating an initial excitement. It just can't be done. So then he finds fault with every potential partner that comes along. She's not young enough. She's not blonde enough. She's not thin enough. Her face isn't. In other words, she's not the first woman that he fell in love with. He's going to have a really hard time. Enjoy your youth. I'm not saying don't enjoy that initial romance, that first kiss. Oh, come on. Have fun. But don't be deceived by it. And don't spend the rest of your life trying to recreate it. You're not going to like that experience. This 55-year-old guy that I'm telling you about, pretty alone. New subject. Every day, I hear people agonize and moan about what they should be doing for themselves, for other people, or what they shouldn't be doing. It's awful, tears them apart. They worry about it. They feel worse as human beings because of the things they should be doing but aren't, or the things they shouldn't be doing. Oh, pick a thing. Smoking, eating unhealthy, not being nice enough to their family members, blah, 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 blah. And the more they worry, the more they do should and shouldn't, the worse they feel. Worrying about should, a lot of people aren't going to like this, but I don't really care. It's just stupid. It doesn't work. I've never seen it work. I've never once said to somebody, you should do this, and had them say, oh, well, I just love that word. I love being told what I should do, so I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I've never seen that. In fact, should just makes people feel guilty, makes them unhappy. Imagine that you have an 8-year-old who understands multiplication and division, addition and subtraction, and is pretty good at those mathematical functions. His goal is to become an engineer. Reasonable goal, good skills. We're on our way. So you tell him that he should be able to do calculus. Well, engineers do eventually have to learn how to be calculus. And if he wants to be an engineer, he would someday have to be proficient in that particular skill. But is he capable of learning it now? No, unless he's, well, a mathematical freak, because there are some people who can at age 8 do calculus. No. So should he be able to do calculus? Should he be able to? Yes, but not now. I'm going to say it again. Should he be able to do calculus? You could fill in the blank with anything else. Eat more healthy, be fit, quit smoking. Yes. But the likelihood that you're going to be able to do that ideal behavior that you have in your head right now, the odds of that are really tiny. So, not yet. Should we be perfect? Should we be perfectly loving? Yes, that would be lovely. In fact, if you're praying for world peace and you are not perfectly loving, then you are by definition a hypocrite. So, yeah, we should be perfectly loving, but not yet. Not today. What good would it do for this 8-year-old kid to worry about learning calculus? None. To feel bad that he can't? None. So does should have any value here? A little. As a future reference. Like this. If you choose to be an engineer, you will need to learn calculus, but again, not now. How will you get to learn calculus? By being proficient at addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. Now, at 8 years old, you pretty much got to know those things, or you're pretty far behind. Then algebra, then trigonometry, then advanced algebra, then calculus. When you go to college, or maybe before, by a year or two, now that more and more kids are learning advanced subjects like in advanced placement classes, if you still want to be an aerospace engineer, then should you begin to learn calculus? If that's still your goal? Yes, of course. You can't say I want to be an aerospace engineer, but I don't want to learn calculus. Well, you can say it, but it doesn't make any sense. But should isn't going to help you now when you're 8. Let's make this more personal. Would you be happier if you eliminated all the fear in your life? Well, duh, who wouldn't be? Who benefits from fear? Do you need to eliminate all the fear in your life? Yeah, just about as much as you need to breathe. Should you eliminate all the fear in your life? Now this is getting harder. If you want to be happy, you would need to begin the process of doing that. Yes. Tell the truth about yourself. Be vulnerable. Find people to love you. Trust them. Feel the love that they give you. Share love with others. All of that. And if you do all that consistently, you will eliminate your fear. But committing to do all of that, all those steps is far more productive than pounding yourself with saying that you should eliminate fear. It doesn't describe the steps. It describes the end result. It'd be like a child saying, I should be an adult. Well, yeah, but not today. It's a goal too big to be beaten with, and we beat ourselves with goals too far down the road. There is not an hour that goes by that somebody on the phone or by email or whatever says to me, how do I handle this? And I give them some version of, you just asked me a question that translates to, I'm putting together I did this recently, so I can speak from personal experience. I'm putting together a log splitter, a mechanical log splitter, in fact, a kinetic log splitter. How do I do this part? They ask me an emotional equivalent of that. I say, you just asked me how to do step 27 in the instructions, but you haven't done step 1, which is take the splitter out of the case, out of the wood and steel packing case. We are constantly too many steps ahead and feeling bad that we're not more steps ahead. What's the solution? Take the next one step. If you want to do a should, do that. I should take the next one step. We beat ourselves with big goals. But it can be beneficial for us to know that if we want to be happy, yes, we will need to eliminate fear, which will motivate us to take the steps to accomplish it. Stay with now. What is my next step now? Not what should I do if I were perfectly loving. The latter is harmful and foolish. Give what you can give freely now. I get family questions all the time, but shouldn't I be more loving toward my, well, frankly, impossible and schizophrenic brother-in-law? Well, maybe, but that's going to take some effort and it's going to take some steps. Don't should what you can. No, what you can do is what you can do. That's just how it is. There's no should in can. For example, right now, I'm reasonably sure that I could step outside and if I did it properly, I could lift probably 250 pounds off the ground, which is a lot less than I used to be able to. Or I could say, I should be able to lift twice that. Oh. And then I could attempt to lift twice that. And then we don't get stronger. We get what's called injured. We injure ourselves with should. Anytime we focus on past what we can do now, we just get hurt. In this moment, you might be so tired, confused, intimidated, guilt-ridden, afraid, whatever, that you don't have anything to give somebody else, even if they need your time, attention, and love. Well, if you don't have it to give, then don't try, or you will emotionally injure yourself in just as real a way as I would injure myself if I attempted to pick up a log that was too big. In the old days, there was no log too big. Pick them all up. Now, I split them into 5-6 pieces and then I pick up the pieces. And I'm not the slightest bit embarrassed about that. Although the first time that I did that, I was embarrassed. Should you be a loving partner, parent, whatever? Yes, eventually. Notice I'm making this point over and over again because it addresses that word should. Yes, you should. Eventually. In the meantime, focus on the next step that you can take that will contribute toward that eventual goal. I was reading the other day that amongst one fundamental religious group, by which I mean a religion with strict standards. I'm not criticizing a religious group, nor am I criticizing strict religious standards, not at all. But it was a study of one fundamental religious group. And over the past 10 years, the suicide rate of the teenagers in this religious group had increased. It would actually be in the last 10 years, if it had increased by 4%, that would be significant. 40% would be considered epidemic. No. The suicide rate in the last 10 years has increased fourfold. That means by 300%. That's astonishing. I mean, that's crazy making. That's not a rhetorical question. Why has it increased? Because in a world where increasingly there are no standards at all, these kids are hearing constantly the word should, which is what we've been talking about, much more than they hear shh, you're okay. My experience, which is fairly extensive on this subject, is that if we tell people, shh, relax, you're doing okay, here's the next step that you can take if you want to reach this goal. Telling them where they should be right now just doesn't motivate people, doesn't motivate them in a good way. We're actually dying from the word should. These kids who are killing themselves are dying from the word should. People simply don't need to hear that they're defective, which is what they hear when they hear the words should and shouldn't. New subject. Learning about unconditional love, real love, is, well, revolutionary in the beginning for almost everybody that I've had contact with who's learned about it. And I hear versions of this every day. For example, I'm learning that almost everything that I thought I knew about life just isn't true. I'm going to say that again because that's sweeping. I'm learning that almost everything I thought I knew about life just isn't true. End quote. Another example. I've been taught lies my entire life. Pretty sweeping. Another. Where has this been all my life? I finally understand what I've been doing with myself and why and the choices I've been making for decades, and it's all making sense. I'm making choices now instead of just reacting. That's a big thing to say. I got that one just a few days ago. No kidding, unconditional love is not one of the basic principles upon which the world operates. The world is not a loving place. So learning it can be disorienting. If you learn unconditional love and you live in an unconditionally loving way, you will be immediately different from everybody around you. And I hear that pretty commonly too, that people learn about unconditional love, go back and meet somebody that they haven't seen in their life for several years. And the other person will immediately, before a single word is spoken, look at the person who's learned unconditional love and say, what happened to you? Like, did you have some, work done, surgery? People look different when they're loving. I talked to a man recently who said, I'm feeling unsettled lately, so I must not be learning what I need. I must not be trusting. In other words, I must not be doing real love right, if you like. I said, maybe. There are always fears to be dealt with, but I know you. And not learning is not your problem. In fact, you feel unsettled, your word, precisely because you are learning. You're learning that you're inherently worthwhile, something you never knew before. You're learning that you don't need to earn approval or worth, which initially makes you aware that nearly every activity in your life is unhealthy to some degree, or has been. You're learning that your relationships have been based on trading, not on love. That's unsettling. You're learning that you've been a prisoner to old lies and beliefs and feelings and behaviors for a lifetime. You're learning that you almost have to start over from the beginning, brick by brick, building with the truth and with love instead of lies and protecting yourself. Yeah, well, that's a lot to learn. And you are learning it. And so it's unsettling. Kind of like, duh. It's like you woke up one morning and you were on Mars, where the atmosphere is different, strikingly different. The gravity is different. The illumination from the sun is different. Everything is different. So yeah, living an unconditionally loving life is unsettling. And this is precisely why many people start learning about real love, are fascinated by the principles. I hear that all the time. Oh, this is just so interesting. And I don't say it, and these days I don't consciously think it, but I think, well, yeah, interesting, but interesting alone doesn't motivate people. So many people are fascinated by the principles they learn, even excited at finding the truth, but then they leave it because they can't live with that initial discomfort, the initial discomfort that you're talking about, that you're judging yourself badly for, that feeling of being unsettled as they make that enormous shift from the old ways of living, even though it was consistently unfulfilling, to a new perspective, new feelings, and a new kind of happiness. In fact, if you're not unsettled to some degree as you learn to love unconditionally, you probably ain't paying attention. But it's fun, and it's worth it. New subject. The sea, the ocean, is endlessly fascinating. The water, winds, waves, living things, I mean, goodness, what people dedicate their lives to studying the sea. Now, my experience is limited. Not nothing, but limited. I've climbed on rocky shores. I've watched waves for hours, quiet waves, crashing waves. I've been snorkeling. I've scuba dived to considerable depths. Run small boats. Not for long because I get seasick and apparently am capable of actually turning green. I've been on large boats out in the ocean, so I have some familiarity with the sea, but not what I'd call a lot. I have observed that big waves are really fun to watch as they crash against rocky shores. In fact, man, it's a hoot. It's like watching an explosion of water. I don't know if you've ever been to a blowhole, but sometimes the waves will hit the shore, and especially volcanic rock, and they'll burrow gradually a hole into the rock and then up through the surface of the rock on dry land, so that when a wave crashes against the blowhole or against the hole on the outside, the water will come exploding up into the air like a geyser. Those are a hoot. It's especially fun if you can get a friend to go stand really close to a blowhole and they don't realize that it is one. But on the whole, other than some erosion like I just described, the rocks just seem to just take these explosions of water. You and I would be just crushed to death. But over a millennia, they erode. Rocks do. But it takes a long time. Big waves are an entirely different experience when they hit houses or boats anchored near the shore. The destruction is unbelievable to see. I've never been personally anywhere where a tsunami has hit, but you see pictures of these, and we're seeing them more and more often. Whether they're happening more often or we just have better reporting, I couldn't tell you. Some oceanographer could. But we've seen pictures, all of us have, in the last 10 years of tsunamis coming in and wiping out hundreds of buildings and killing thousands of people with one wave. Wow. Pick up entire boats, big steel ships, and just pick them up out of the water and deposit them in the middle of town. We all encounter big circumstantial and emotional waves. We all do. They're unavoidable, just like the waves in the ocean are unavoidable. No way around it. The people around us die. That's a wave. We get sick. Cars run into us. We run into them. Unexpected financial events occur. Our partners get unhappy. Our children get unhappy. We have difficult bosses or coworkers, or people cheat us or lie to us or break into our homes or assault us or whatever. We have other relationships that are really trying, like with parents and extended family and more. Waves are everywhere, just like in the ocean. If we're built on rock, if we have sufficient unconditional love in our lives, then the crashing waves might splash us. I've stood on the rocks and been soaked in 2 seconds. They might splash us, they might soak us, but they won't destroy us. Usually they won't even frighten us. We can, in fact, learn from them. I find it just absolutely fascinating to watch waves crash against the shore and learn where you can stand and get the most enjoyment without being washed out to sea. If we don't have a loving foundation in our emotional lives, then every wave becomes a trial. I told you about a woman earlier who turns everything in her life into drama in the house that she lived in, and then alone when she was the only tenant and couldn't blame it on anybody else. Every wave becomes a trial if we don't have a sufficiently loving foundation. Rock, even the little ones. The big ones come along and flatten us. People who are insufficiently loved live on the edge of survival all the time. So now, big ones just, they're flattened or it washes them away. And without a sufficient foundation, we're constantly wary, read that as afraid, of the next wave all the time. There may not be a storm, but we're constantly looking for the next rogue wave that's going to kill us. The waves will come in our emotional lives. They're a guarantee. Just like waves in the ocean are unavoidable. The sun hits the surface of the earth, heats the surface of the earth and the air differentially, and you get waves because you get wind. What we can't choose whether there are waves, is to choose how close to the shore we want to be and what foundation we'll build our homes on. What we can choose, in short, is whether to feel loved and be loving. And that makes all the difference in the world. New subject. Our speech betrays us all the time. The words that we use are not accidental. That's what I'm saying. They reveal what we're thinking and believing, and often it's not helpful. Let me give you an example. Example number 1. We meet somebody or we talk to somebody after a long time of absence. Here's some common expressions when we meet somebody. It's been a long time. Or I've really missed you. One or both of those. What do people hear when we say that? It's been a long time. I've really missed you. Even though they're often not conscious of it. Now, I'm not guessing here. I've tested this out with hundreds of people. What people hear is when you say, well, it's been a really long time. What they hear is, why haven't you contacted me before now? It's been a long time and I've missed seeing you and I'm blaming you. Or you should have written or called or visited before now. Again, from the expression long time. Or they feel you've made me sad because you just said to them, I missed you. Or you don't care about me because it's been a long time. It's very confusing to say this to people. It's been a long time. And I'm not kidding about this. I've checked this out with lots of people. People often feel all of that, even if they can't find the words for it. So you're wondering, what could we say instead of, it's been a long time, which is filled with judgment, or I missed you? We could stick with right now. I'm so glad to see you. It's so nice to hear your voice. Why refer to the past at all? said with a tone of delight, not recrimination. It's been a long time is almost rarely spoken with a tone of joy. Or you could go nuts and say, my heart leaps like a gazelle hearing your voice. You could do that. I have. People love to hear that they make your heart leap like a gazelle. Or, how fun to see you. No judgments, living now. Another example. I'm just giving you examples of how we betray ourselves with our words, or how they can be misinterpreted. The phrase, quote, you didn't, whatever, fill in the blank. If you haven't heard that phrase today, you will before the day's over. You didn't. Some form of should have, didn't. I noticed that the garbage can is in the same place that it was, last year. We hear some form of you didn't all the time. Take out the trash, meet my expectations, make me happy, demonstrate your competence, whatever. These are all variations on I don't like what you did, or I don't like what you didn't do. So what does the other person hear when we say you didn't? They hear that they're defective. They hear us say you're defective. They hear us say, I love you less. I know we didn't mean to do that, but they hear it. Look at their face. Or they hear, all I see is your mistakes. I don't see you at all. Well, so what could you say? Instead of you didn't, you could ask, and I mean really ask, not sarcastically ask. Do you know if the garbage got put out? If the answer is no, then it gives the other person a chance to just go do it. If the answer is yes, they get the satisfaction of saying, well, yeah, I do know whether it got put out because, let me think, I did it. We like to say that. Would you be willing to take the garbage out? Now, I've learned this personally in my own life, that if you just ask somebody, would you be willing to take the garbage out? That works infinitely better than saying, I've told you 8 times before to take the garbage out. Is it still not taken out? That's a really stupid way to ask somebody to do something. Ask them like you're asking for the first time. If the person you're asking is your child, well, then that's a whole separate subject, and that'll be the subject of many parenting commentaries. Or, do we have any duct tape? So let's say you asked your partner to buy duct tape the next time that they went to the store and you go to find some. Instead of saying, did you get that duct tape? I don't know anybody personally who says, oh, I love that tone of voice. I don't know anybody who does. But do we have any duct tape? Even though you've asked them 8 times before, you ask like it's the first time. If they have got the duct tape, they get to say a satisfied yes. If not, they get to come to the conclusion that, eek, I've been irresponsible. They might even get up from what they're doing and go to the store and get it for you. So what am I saying? Pay attention to the words you say. Not be cautious of them. Don't be afraid of them. But be aware that the words that we say are very often not heard like we thought we said them. Ask for what you want. Don't make accusations about what you didn't get. I worked with a couple just recently, and as they went back and forth at each other with recriminations, I said, let's just try this for 1 week. For 1 week, neither of you is going to say the word no or don't or not. That's it. No, don't, not. Hang on. No, don't, not. Yeah, all 3 contain the word no. And let's see what happens. For a whole week, neither of them used those words. And at the end of the week, they said, we like this better. Because they paid attention to their words. Because it turns out that how we feel comes out in our words, and the words we use influence how we feel. It's a cycle. Pay attention to it. Pay attention to the opportunities that you have to be loving instead of accusatory, understanding instead of critical. And you're going to like your own life a whole lot better. We'll see you in a week.